Hello and welcome to this video on the full moon in Taurus. The Taurian full moon is occurring on the 15th of November at 21:28 GMT. Obviously, different times to time zones, it will occur earlier or later. And it's at 24 degrees of Taurus. So let's dive in. Full moons are where you reap or you harvest, if you like, what you sowed at the new moon. And so we'll be looking back to the new moon in Taurus in May of 24 to see some of the seeding that was going on there that we're seeing come to fruition in this full moon. This full moon really does end a cycle and begin a new one, because it is the last moon that we will have with Pluto in Capricorn. On the 20th, Pluto will move into Aquarius and be there for the next 20 years. So this does herald a real new beginning. And I mentioned the new moon in Taurus back in May. It's just an interesting point to note that at that time, briefly, Pluto had slipped into the sign of Aquarius. And then it retrograded back into Capricorn. So it's very much the flavour of this change was already resonating back at that new moon. So we find ourselves in a time of transition. And when we're in times of transition, they also bring trials and tribulations. They're often an upsetting, difficult time. Let's talk just a little bit about this in relation to the Taurian full moon. Taurus is a very embodied sign. It represents many things. But the moon in Taurus is our sense of security. It's where we feel safe. It's where we enjoy the good things of life. Good food, comfort, beauty, all of those lovely things that make life seem worth living. So this is really emphasized with the full moon in Taurus. The moon is actually exalted in Taurus, and this is quite something of a moon. I mean, there's some debate, is it a supermoon or not? It's close to the Earth. It looks bigger. I think it probably qualifies as one. So this is an exaggeration of those features. And I have to say that the moon isn't alone, because Uranus, which brings shocks, surprises, awakenings, jolts, and so on, is conjunct right by the moon. Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. And as we've just said, it is into Aquarius that Pluto will be going on the 20th of November, beginning this whole new period of time. So we have the awakener, the disruptor, that which brings shocks, surprises, are really hitting us in our sense of security. But before we jump to the conclusion that Uranus brings nothing but trauma, shocks, awakenings, etc., I would like to link Uranus to the tarot card which represents it, and that is the Fool. Because I think that through an examination of this card, we will reach perhaps a deeper understanding of what's going on here, and perhaps see through to a more hopeful and kinder interpretation of exactly what's being instigated here. So certainly the Fool very much echoes what I've just said about new beginnings. The Fool is the first card in the deck of the tarot. It represents the beginning of a whole new journey. And that's something I'd like to explore. But I will come back to this card, but I just want to park it for now. But I think it's going to help us to unpick some of the complexity of what's going on here. The ultimate ruler of the full moon in Taurus is Venus. She rules Taurus. Venus is currently in the sign of Capricorn. And there she is being pretty discriminating about values, and about values that endure and that can go forward into time, that have endurance and durability, that are core values, if you like. So there's an awful lot suggesting here that this moon is throwing a light onto our values. Which of them are worth preserving? Where perhaps have we chosen correctly and where incorrectly? So it's very much in these choices about what do we really need to go forward? What is it humanity really needs? And what actually is dross that we don't need? An alarm bell rings here because an asteroid called Ixion is sitting right by Venus. And this is something that doesn't speak very well to the idea of values. Ixion was an evildoer, ultimately, in Greek mythology, not always without provocation, but he was somebody who was immoral. He was actually forgiven by Zeus, the king of the gods. And then even after being forgiven, he was involved in acts of rape and violence. So this was an inability to repent or change, and a complete lack of morality. Ixion eventually was bound on a wheel of fire by Zeus and punished. But I think the fact that this immoral energy is resonating there right by Venus, which is about our values, speaks to the fact that some of the choices made have not been of the highest order. Furthermore, there are a couple of bodies that are right by the moon and Uranus. One of those is the asteroid Gold, which is associated, not surprisingly, with wealth, money, riches. This is sitting right in between Uranus and the moon. Now, of course, one of the things that Taurus does rule are things like the money markets. And it may be that this is a sense of perhaps surprising uprises in that, or down trends in that. Who can say which way with Uranus? Or it may be that there is real money being generated here at this point in time. It certainly seems, especially with Ixion by Venus, that perhaps choices are being made now for extremely material reasons. I'd also like to draw in the fact that Sedna, who is an Oort belt object, Sedna was an Inuit goddess who ultimately was betrayed very brutally by her father, who actually cut off her fingers when she was clinging to the side of his canoe in a storm in order to save his own skin. And she floated down into the oceans and then actually seeded into the most amazing array of marine life, the whales, the dolphins. So her abundance was not kept down. But there is a message there about the abused feminine. Now, of course, we can take that on the level of the feminine aspect in our society. We can also take it, I think, because we're looking at Taurus, and Taurus is the earth, represents very much the earth, that we can be looking also, it doesn't have to be either or, looking also at the mistreatment of the planet. And I'd like to bring in Uranus at this point, because one of the lower meanings of the Fool is being stupid, is making foolish choices. This is its lowest interpretation. And it occurs to me that that's something which is happening. We are at the moment bound up with our divisions, with our wars, with our conflicts, with our polarities, without addressing the much, much bigger issue of our planet. And the folly of that, the foolishness of that, it just seems staggering, doesn't it? I think there never was a time when it was more important to cleave tight to true values, those of holding the line for the light, those of holding the space of the heart, those of compassion and care for each other and for the planet. I think that's very important, that we hold those things and that we are not so thrown off centre by the turbulent events that keep happening in our world at the moment that we lose our footing and stability with the values that really matter. And I'm going to bring in another tarot card here, and that's the Wheel. Now, this card represents the big cycles of time, just like the new cycle of time, which is beginning now as Pluto moves into Aquarius. And you can see that the Wheel brings up some pretty unpleasant creatures there, some pretty strange and weird and wonderful things that are clinging there, coming out of the depths as the Wheel turns. And if we are riding the rim of the Wheel, we're riding the outer events of our world, we're going to be tossed and turned and disturbed greatly. The place where we feel less turbulence is right here in the center of the Wheel, right in the hub, which is, of course, our core self, our place in us which remains quiet, which is tuned to the cosmos, which is tuned to that which endures, the values which matter. And so if we can remain there, we're so much more able to hold steady, to keep that steady flame burning that is so needed right now. At the moment, our journey forward, humanity's forward movement, its evolution, is challenged by Venus and Ixion. Venus and Ixion are squaring, challenging the lunar nodes between Aries and Libra. And they present the challenge to us collectively of having the right values, of choosing wisely, making the right choices. I want to end by saying that these are obviously not easy times. You don't need me to tell you that, I'm sure. Times are difficult, they are challenging, but they are moments in time, and they are moments of time which will pass, and hopefully lessons learned and forward to better times. I'd like to bring in the Fool card again here, because one of the other meanings of the Fool card is of taking that leap of faith, having the trust to believe that all will be well and that we may take the risks of leaping like the Fool off the cliff into the unknown. We don't know where we're going, We have to take the leap of faith ultimately. That's what we have to do. Love is everything, and it's all that matters. Let's hold on to it tight. Thank you. Thank you for staying with me. Bye-bye.